And we're following breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ from college football, where Michigan will self-impose a 3-game ban on head coach Jim Harbaugh. That's according to multiple reports. Harbaugh would miss the second-ranked Wolverines' game against East Carolina, UNLV, a game you'll see on CBS, and Bowling Green. It would also allow Harbaugh to return for the Big Ten opener against Rutgers in Week 4. The suspension stems from Harbaugh allegedly misleading NCAA investigators who were looking into recruiting violations at the school. As you take a look at their schedule, you see those first 3 games, the 2nd, 9th, and the 16th, with a return Week 4 for the Big Ten opener versus Rutgers. All right, so college football analyst Brady Quinn is here to discuss this. Brady, first I'll get your reaction to this. They had the deal in place, then the deal was wiped off the table, the 4-game suspension, then it was wiped off the table. Now the program itself is imposing a 3-game suspension. Yeah, the deal wasn't agreed to by the NCAA. That was really the details that came out, and then that can got kicked down the road to really 2024. And then we'll see what potential suspension that Jim Harbaugh could be under. But in this particular case, the University of Michigan has really taken a first-mover advantage and said, okay, well, what happens if we self-impose a suspension on Jim Harbaugh? He misses the first 3 games, close to what we thought was the agreed-upon suspension initially, and they're probably in hopes of this softening whatever blow is to come in 2024. Now, if you look through the history of the NCAA suspensions, when teams have either self-imposed some sort of punishment or suspension, usually has not really mattered to the NCAA. Michigan's hoping it will, but I think the other thing you can do by self-imposing a suspension here is, for starters, Michigan's going to be favored by a gazillion points in the first 3 games. Yes. They shouldn't have any trouble without Jim Harbaugh, and they were probably planning on this anyway after they were initially planning on the 4-game suspension. So all they're doing is essentially trying to soften the blow in the future, and then hopefully thinking that in the future, the way college football is changing, maybe the NCAA isn't even the one that's in power to make these sorts of suspensions and decisions. It could be some other potential entity or governing body that's overseeing all of this that would then be the party to actually lay down whatever punishment Jim Harbaugh would face. Would you be surprised if the Committee of Infractions came back and said, we're going to give him another 3 games on top of that? In 2024? Yeah. Potentially, yeah. I mean, like I said before, this doesn't mean anything. But there's been other teams who've self-imposed punishments, and literally the NCAA has done nothing with it. I mean, they have basically come back and said, okay, that doesn't matter to us. We're still going to vacate these games. We're still going to take this away. So the NCAA is going to impose whatever they believe the punishment is justified once it come to that time, probably now in 2024, at least based on the reports we've seen from Jim Harbaugh's attorneys, and then from the comments from the NCAA, which at this point in time, the NCAA seems to be the only party that's allowed to comment on it, not so much Jim Harbaugh. But so again, this may be a move based on the frustration from Jim Harbaugh's representation, since they're supposed to be closed-mouthed about it. The NCAA has kind of gotten a word out that this could be more serious than just a cheeseburger as far as what was reported as far as the recruiting violation. Yeah. And so then you say, well, okay, we're going to be proactive. We're going to give him a 3-game suspension, and then we'll see what you guys want to do in 2024. In terms of how this Michigan team is set up, I mean, J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback under center, how much better of a position are they in this year to be without their head coach for those first 3 games from a personnel standpoint? I think it's a great point, because if they weren't in a position where you've got 4 or 5 returning offensive linemen, a loaded backfield with Corm and obviously Edwards as well, experience of wide receivers, and then J.J. McCarthy coming back as your returning starting quarterback, 9 of 11 starters on defense, you might be concerned if you're Michigan. Now, the schedule doesn't lend you to think that, but still, we've seen teams stumble before early with some surprising games. Not this team. This is probably the best position I think Michigan has been maybe since the last national championship. I mean, it might be fair to say that based on the way they recruited, based on the way they developed, based on what they pumped into the NFL. And I think a lot of the NFL prospects they've got on this particular team, you've got to think Michigan, with the way they've had a stranglehold in the Big Ten the past 2 years and what they have coming back, they not only should be the favorite, even though they're not right now to win the Big Ten, but people should be starting to try to ink them in as a college football playoff contender. Our Brady Quinn joining us here on CBS Sports HQ as we break down the breaking news that the University of Michigan self-imposing a 3-game suspension for head coach Jim Harbaugh as they try to ward off potential NCAA penalties that could come down in 2024. They'll be talking more on this on the Cover 3 podcast. You can download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcast from, or you can listen right now by scanning that QR code. They will for sure have a podcast about this coming up shortly.